Welcome on into the Cougar Tracks podcast, powered by KSLSports.com. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper, coming to you from Denver, Colorado, site of BYU's first-round matchup against the VCU Rams in the NCAA Tournament. You can follow me on X and Instagram, Mitch_Harper. Follow KSL Sports as well, and download the KSL Sports app so you can see all my bylines and content from here in Denver and the potential NCAA tournament run for this BYU team. I arrived in Denver a little bit before the BYU basketball team on Tuesday afternoon. A little bit of behind the scenes of what goes on with the NCAA tournament, because you're thinking probably, well, why are you getting there on Tuesday? The game isn't until Thursday. Well, on Wednesday, there's press conferences, there's open locker rooms, open practices. It's an eventful day on Wednesday at the NCAA tournament, so can have all of that coverage and content coming to you from the Ball Arena, home of the Denver Nuggets here in Denver. And it's the first time the media gets to watch a Kevin Young coach practice. We haven't seen any practices this year. We'll get that chance coming up on Wednesday, so that should be pretty fun. I'm really curious, too, to see if there are a lot of BYU fans that show up. Last year in Omaha, there was barely anyone that showed up to that practice. Omaha was a difficult place to get to on short notice, and middle of nowhere America, it was challenging for Cougar Nation to show up to that game. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot more fans in Denver. I was watching a local news broadcast here on a Fox affiliate here in Denver, and they noted that Wisconsin BYU fans already showing up in downtown, which, no surprise. Those are probably the two top fan bases coming into Denver. I'd also say Michigan probably third, but I don't know how extensive Michigan fans are when it comes to their basketball team if they travel, but I'm sure there are a lot of alumni out west that'll make the trip for the maize and blue. So, but those are the top three fan bases in terms of potential head count here at the NCAA tournament. BYU's open practice on Wednesday will take place at 1:15 p.m. The doors open at the Ball Arena at 10 a.m., so you can watch all the practices if you wanted to do that. If you were that much of a college basketball sicko that you wanted to do that, feel free. The doors will be open at 10 a.m. for you to watch all the way up until 5 p.m., all 8 of these teams that are in Denver in their practices. Time continues to go on here, and I've dove in more to this BYU-VCU matchup, the initial thoughts and kind of surface level reaction on Sunday's kind of going away, and it's really diving deep into the weeds onto this matchup. And even as you dive into this further, you just feel like this is going to be a high-level game. I think that's what I come away feeling like, is that these are two teams that probably should be meeting in a round of 32, maybe a Sweet 16 type of matchup. When you look at their metrics, when you look at their resumes, these are two teams that probably should not be meeting in the round of 64. But, you know, VCU being a team that was in the Atlantic 10 and probably would not have gotten into the field of 68 had they not won their conference tournament. They were in the predicament that they were in, that they needed to win their tournament to just get in, and they get an 11 seed, whereas BYU, no Sunday play, no great non-conference schedule wins. Everything was built within the conference. It makes sense to get a 6th. I still think there's an argument to be had that BYU deserved a 5, but I think you'll take the location. These are two good basketball teams, though. And, you know, the trends, too, with VCU is that they were the number one offense in the A10 this year. But you dive into the A10, and there's not many great offenses in that league. And it makes you wonder a little bit if VCU's defensive numbers are a byproduct of, you know, not the greatest. I don't want to say weak offenses in the A10, but just maybe not the high-level adjusted efficiency metrics that you see in Ken Palm and Bart Torvik. They're not seeing that night in and night out. And even Ryan Odom pointed that out in his interview with Hans and Scotty G on the KSL Sports Zone is that they're not seeing the level of talent and athletes that BYU has gone up against every single night in the Big 12 Conference. When I look at this matchup, though, I feel like people are sleeping on BYU's physicality and toughness. They're a much tougher team than they've been in the past. I do believe that. Now, against Houston, they were completely shell-shocked in the beginning, and they never recovered. I think it's, in some respects, you say that's probably a good reminder for this team to face a little bit of adversity going into the NCAA tournament, to remind them they are not invincible. Anything they do will not turn into gold. They still have to play physical and play at a high level and efficient. That's going to be key for this BYU team. They've got to do that. But I do believe their physicality is underrated, particularly with Richie Saunders and Keba Keita. I feel like this is a tougher basketball team than last year against Duquesne. Remember last year against Duquesne, it was in the second half, and Duquesne basically sent a message with their Fuseme, I think his name was Trame, I can't remember the name now, but he basically tackled Noah Waterman, sending a message that they're going to be the tougher team in the second half as well, and they were. BYU physically got dominated against Duquesne. I don't believe BYU is going to be physically outclassed by VCU. I think a big key for BYU, though, is to keep VCU in check from three-point range. BYU has been a team this year that's prone to giving up open three-point shots to their opponents. They've got to shut that down. When you look at the last two losses for VCU in the calendar year in 2025, both of those games, VCU shot 16% from three. They've got to be able to defend the three-point line and take it away. 4 of their 5 starters can hit three-pointers. They've got to account for that at all times and take it away. If VCU cannot knock down threes, BYU is going to win this game. I feel like maybe the law of averages come into play where BYU is not going to have the poor shooting performance as they did against Houston in this matchup. I'd like to think that BYU is going to at least get 9 three-pointers, at least, I would think. It just then becomes a question of can they get to 11, 12, 13. When they're in that territory, they're one of the toughest teams to take down. And I think, too, with BYU is that in some of the games that they played, Arizona, Iowa State in the Big 12 tournament, they've not only looked like one of the best teams in the Big 12, but a team that looked like they could be a Final Four good type of team. That's how well BYU was playing during their winning streak. And can they recapture a little bit of that mojo going into the NCAA tournament? I do believe having Kevin Young as the head coach is going to keep this team loose. I don't feel like the pressures of BYU's failures of the past are going to weigh on this team. There's some guys that are returning from last year, Fusini Traore, Richie Saunders, Dallin Hall, Trevin Nell. They're back from last year, but outside of that, I mean, it's pretty much a new club. It's a new squad. And all of the past failures in, 2015, 2014, that does not apply to this group at all. Yegor Demon, when BYU, gave up a big lead to Ole Miss in 2015, he was, 8 years old? That was 10 years ago. And he was in another continent. So none of that applies to this team. Yes, BYU has been a team that has historically always struggled in the NCAA tournament. One reason I believe that's been the case is that BYU tends to get off to slow starts. For every start against Syracuse in 2004, oddly enough, here in Denver, where they were really good and they completely tore apart that 2-3 zone of Jim Boeheim's, they've had so many starts in NCAA tournaments where they just lay an egg. Kind of like that start they had against Houston last week. That's happened far too often in the NCAA tournament. It happened last year against Duquesne where they were down 9-0 before they could blink. UCLA, they had a horrible start as well. And remember in that game, Johnny Juzang was questionable. He was banged up. It was in doubt whether he was going to play or not. him and Jaime Jaquez just tore apart BYU. There's been just far too many times where BYU puts themselves in a hole. I think it's going to be critical for this BYU team to maybe get an easy bucket at the rim. Go to Richie Saunders downhill, establish that early and have success. Or maybe a design set for Trevin Knell, who has kind of been a common, start the game off with a 3-ball guy that BYU's turned to. I think of the Kansas game. They did it against Iowa State, also Houston in the Big 12 tournament. Maybe they continue more of that. But to me, getting an easy bucket at the rim would be ideal. And the guy to do that is Richie Saunders. I just think setting a tone there for BYU will be key. It was also interesting, too, getting ready for this game. ESPN on, I believe they call it NBA Today with Jonathan Givony. Malik Andrews was interviewing Jonathan Givony, and he was talking about NBA draft prospects who could elevate their stock with a run in March Madness. He pointed to the player from Drake and then also Yegor Demon. And he noted the inconsistencies of Yegor this year. He's to me the X factor in all of this for BYU. If Yegor is the superstar that we saw at the very beginning of the season before his knee contusion, BYU could be definitely a second weekend team. Yegor, I don't know what to reasonably expect from his shooting, particularly on the outside. I don't expect much. I mean, it's been consistently a guy that at best is giving you 1-3 at most, but he can't turn over the basketball. He's got to be strong with the basketball. That's going to be, to me, the X factor. I want to see an assist-to-turnover ratio at 7-1, 7-0, where he's not coughing it up. That's going to be critical. That's where he can be the X factor because Yegor isn't a selfish guy. He wants to facilitate and get his teammates involved and get them in perfect spots to hit shots. And his passing ability is better than anyone. So Yegor has got to be great. And I think it's, a pretty good matchup in terms of international players. Yegor and Max Shulga from VCU. He's from Ukraine, former Utah State transfer, two of the best European players in this year's NCAA tournament. So that's kind of a fun storyline, too, heading into this matchup. But Yegor's got to be special. And if he can just take care of the basketball and not be fazed by the physicality, that's going to be huge for BYU. You wonder what wrinkles Ryan Odom is going to throw at BYU, particularly Yegor Demon. Does he pressure him early and put Kevin Young in a spot where he has to turn to Dallin Hall again before the under-16 media timeout? They need to have Yegor have a strong opening performance to get some confidence because ideally, along with the offensive buckets, they need Yegor to have a strong start as well. He can't be going to the Pine before the first media timeout. That's what he had to do against Houston. And Kevin Young had to turn to Dallin Hall immediately. They need Yegor to be spectacular in this NCAA tournament. An interesting side note, too, heading into this matchup, and it kind of got brought to the spotlight on Tuesday with all the coaching carousel moves. Darian DeVries from West Virginia, he's now on the move. He's going to Indiana. He's officially the head coach of the Hoosiers. But a lot of people speculating about Ryan Odom. Is he going to be maybe the next Virginia head coach? His name continues to be linked to a lot of jobs, potentially. It's just getting tossed out there. No official concrete reports that he's going to be the next head man at Virginia or even maybe Villanova. But you wonder if that can be a distraction when, these coaches, their agents are handling backroom meetings with other schools. Can that be a little bit of a distraction? I don't know. But, I think that's something that's kind of interesting too. But Ryan Odom is a coach that's had success in this tournament. He manufactured the greatest upset in NCAA tournament history with UMBC taking down Virginia back in 2018. So does he have another trick or two up his sleeve to even, make his resume even more glamorous for a potential new job as he climbs the coaching ladder? He's a really good coach, and he's had a lot of success with his VCU team. So it should be a good one on Thursday. We'll have more coverage coming up on Wednesday, like I said, from the press conferences and the open practice and things like that. I've got my score prediction up on KSLSports.com. I do believe BYU is going to win. I do think the Cougars are going to pull this one out and get it done, but it's going to be a tough one. You can see that score prediction article up on KSLSports.com, and I'll dive into it a little bit deeper as well tomorrow on the reasons behind that score prediction, but it should be a good one. And I'm enjoying my time so far here in Denver. I'm staying here at a Marriott in downtown Denver. When I pulled into the parking lot, I was immediately greeted with a smell that you would associate with a place like Denver, who has recreational laws in place, if you understand my drift. That immediately greeted me in the hotel parking lot. Wasn't a huge fan of that, but still, pretty solid so far. I will say downtown is pretty much dead. They're experiencing a winter storm coming in. I believe it was maybe the storm that was in Utah on Tuesday morning. Maybe it shifted east. I don't know. I'm not Matt Johnson. I'm not Eubank throwing on the white suit, but a little bit of snow, winter storm action here in Colorado. It could be a little bit winter conditions on Wednesday, and then things clear up the rest of the week here in the Mile High City. But looking forward to it. It's my third NCAA tournament that I've covered with KSL Sports, and we'll see if BYU can produce a win and cover a BYU team in the dance that actually advances and gets to Saturday and the weekend ahead in the NCAA tournament. We will have you covered on KSLSports.com and the KSL Sports app. And a quick programming note, too. On Thursday, if you are not watching on TNT, we will have radio coverage on KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM. No stream on the KSL News Radio app or the KSL Sports app, so just note that. No streaming, only over the air on 102.7 FM. But we will have an extended pregame from Denver here at noon, getting you ready for BYU and VCU. So I'm looking forward to that here on Thursday for the Cougs and the Rams. First meeting since 1983, and that meeting took place in Lexington, Kentucky, and now they meet in the NCAA tournament here in Denver. We'll have more coverage, like I said, here on KSL Sports and on the Cougar Tracks podcast.